Alright, so before I begin, I want to take a moment standing here in front of you today to recognize the privileges that I have been allotted throughout my life. They are privileges that I feel like cannot go unrecognized because in doing so, it would mean that I am no longer conscious of the sacrifices not only my family, but myself have made to be here. They are the same sacrifices that have given me the opportunity to stand in front of you today and speak to a topic that I am extremely passionate about. They are the sacrifices that, for millions of people around the world, will end in disappointment because of the systems that we have put into place for ourselves. Family, Rance, Plan B. So what do my amazingly strong-willed family, Rance, home to 250 kilometers of cellars that house my favorite brands of champagne, and Plan B, who in my opinion has, is, and will always be the most dominant skate team in the world, have in common? To you, probably nothing, and that's fair. But we'll get back to that a little bit later. So for years, psychologists, behavioral analysts, and psychiatrists from around the world have discussed the power behind the psychological importance of gratitude and gratefulness. Now in 2012, Psychology Today released an article, more technically a web article, so we won't call it an article, but anyway, they released an article that said the following. It said consistent positive interactions, typically those that involve gratitude, as well as social interactions, not only increase your happiness levels, but also decrease your levels of depression. This article then went on to list, and I quote, 7 ways that will not only deck your holes, but will offer you an antidote to depressive symptoms all year long. A poor choice of wording if you ask me, but that's beside the point. The list went as follows. First, gratitude visits. Basically delivering a letter of thanks via email or handwritten to someone in your life that's made a positive difference. Second, 3 good things. Taking the time out of your week to write down or even think about 3 good things that have happened to you in your life that week. Third, using your signature strengths in a new way. So if you have a talent, if you're a great artist, use that in a different way, in a way that you never thought to use it before. Fourth, 3 funny things. If you slipped in front of a group of people and they all laughed. If something great happened to you that you thought was funny and made you smile, think about those things. Next, the gift of time. Giving someone in your life your time, or taking the time from someone else to let them know that they're important to you. Next, the one door closes, another door opens. This idea comes from thinking about a moment in time where something bad happened to you, but out of it, something good, something positive came and you felt better about yourself. After this, the article then went on to discuss the science behind the psychological power of gratitude. And if there's one thing I've learned during my time at Quest, being a liberal arts university, you never question the sciences. And so, this brings us back to Rance, family, and Plan B. Some time ago, sitting on my then psychiatrist's overly plush couch, a crumpled tissue in my hand, a snot rocket in my nose the size of a jelly tot waiting to be expelled upon my next wave of tears, something life-changing happened to me. And I'll be honest with you, up until this point, all of my appointments with this individual were all about me. I cried, I poured my heart out, and I always walked out of her office feeling a little bit lighter. But on this day, something interesting happened. Something that changed my life and made me who I am today. During the wind down of our session, she looked at me and she said, Phindile, I've got homework for you today. Because that's exactly what everybody wants to hear after spending an hour of their time pouring their heart out courtesy of mommy and daddy's pockets. So me being the person that I was at that time, pretended to pay attention, looked out the window, was like, okay. She smiled and she was like, have you ever heard of the term positive psychology? To be honest with you, I had, but it never appealed to me. I didn't see how the term positive psychology could be used for someone like me, someone miserable, someone who just didn't have any happiness in their life. And so, like I said, being as I was back then, I pretended to listen, kind of stared out the window, and she said, good. I want you to go home this week, and every day I want you to think of 3 words of gratitude. Think of 3 things that you're grateful for, tell them to absolutely no one, and when you come back next week, we'll talk about them. Now, given my current status as a Quest student, you can imagine that I wasn't too thrilled with that half answer. And so, before I left, I stopped and I said, what's the point of this? What is your end game? Why are you making me do this? And how long am I gonna have to do this for? And with the smug pop of her lips, the one thing that to this day still annoys me about her, and whenever I bump into her, she does it. But anyway, she looked at me and said, ideally, Pindi, for the rest of your life. And that just had me. I was done. I looked at this woman in utter disappointment. The same level of disappointment that today is reserved solely for people who choose to take a full bite out of the Kit Kat instead of just breaking it off one finger at a time. So you can imagine my frustration when this woman looked at me and said, you'd have to do this for the rest of your life. Now bear in mind, when I was there, in that moment, I sat and thought to myself, yo, there are 365 days in a year. 3 words every day puts me at around 1,095 words for a year. And if I'm lucky to say live to be, I don't know, 80, that's over 71,175 words of gratitude that I need to think of in my lifetime. I can't even spell the word gratitude without autocorrect. How am I supposed to think of 71,175 words of gratitude? I don't know. If I'm honest, standing up in front of you today, I'm embarrassed to say that I left that session reeling. I was absolutely livid, and for the first time in a very long time, I got into the side of my mom's car and said absolutely nothing. I shied away from every gentle, reaffirming touch that she tried to give me on the way home, not knowing that I would hate myself just a little bit more. The crazy thing about it is I wouldn't hate myself because of the dark and tormenting thoughts that have made themselves permanent residents within my mind. I hated myself for ever shying away from the touch of a woman who didn't understand the misery in front of her, who for years put up with the wrath of a spoiled, believably misunderstood child, and to this day stands by me with nothing but compassion and unconditional love. Because believe it or not, only a few days after the day I believed my psychiatrist ruined my life, I know, really dramatic, I've grown up a lot since then. I was sitting with my sisters, whose smiles could lighten up even the darkest of rooms. My beautiful dogs, who would pee at the bottom of your feet out of utter excitement. They were rescued, so it was okay. And I remember looking around and thinking, wow, I'm really lucky to have these people in my life. And it was at that moment that I thought to myself, wow, maybe the woman whose qualifications I questioned only a few days ago was actually onto something. And that made me think. France, family, plan B. I promise that's the last time you'll hear those words. 5,476, 5,477, 5,478. Now, if my calculations are correct, and given my inability to do any type of math, they probably aren't, but those are the numbers for the 3 words that on January 14th were my words of gratitude. Now, the reason that's significant is because that was the same time I started thinking about what I wanted to discuss during this talk. It was the same day that I started to think about the ideas that I wanted to leave, having left the stage. And that is how you manage depression. It's something that I would love to be able to say in conclusion to that talk. But unfortunately, it's not true. Though it is true for me, how the power of positive thinking and positive psychology has helped me regulate my mood over the years, that is not the case for every individual in the world. It's not the case for anyone. Now, Webster defines gratitude as an emotion of the heart that is excited by a benefit received or a favor. It is a sentiment of kindness or goodwill towards a benefactor. In short, Webster defines gratitude as thankfulness. Having had access to some of the best medical care, really good education, that has allowed me to accept who I am. Not only to accept who I am, but to also accept the judgment and ridicule that comes from the outside world when posed with someone like me. It's helped me accept that people's perceptions of who I am are always going to be different, but as long as I don't let them affect me, that's cool. The same, unfortunately, cannot be said for every individual, as I said before, dealing with a type of mental health disorder. In fact, it would be a stretch for me to stand up here on the stage today and say that for 20% of the world's adolescents dealing with mental health disorders, the same can be applied. In low and middle income countries, where the highest rate of individuals dealing with neuropsychiatric disorders live, There is only one child psychologist to every 4 million children. So if we think about those numbers, the idea behind gratitude, the power of positive thinking, and psychologies of good ideas and good mindfulness kind of starts to become the idea of a children's bedtime story and looks more and more like that and less like a reality. And I can say this confidently to you as someone who comes from a country with over 10 official languages, and yet only one has a true exponential definition for the term depression. I can say this knowing not even a fraction of the heartache and the struggle that individuals in low and middle income countries go through every day dealing with depression. I can say this because for me, stigma was my biggest barrier. Stigma from my friends, from my family, stigma from a lack of comprehension and a lack of acknowledgement for the term depression. Stigma that means in places where I'm from, South Africa, most people dealing with depression will choose to never seek assistance. Instead, stigma has become so damaging, they would rather take a life than reach out to another for assistance. And this brings us to the main point that I'm trying to make, which is the how. How did all of this come to be? Whenever discussions about health come into play, be it in regards to communicable diseases such as HIV or tuberculosis, or in regards to non-communicable disorders such as autism and other neurodevelopmental disorders, the why is always the main point of discussion. Not enough education, not enough systems in place to help and reach the underserviced. And that is a point that should never, ever go unrecognized, but it's also something that we're aware of. It's something that we know. We know that for every 4 million children out there, there's only one child psychiatrist available. We know that the golden standard of testing created in high-income countries used to treat and detect neurodevelopmental disorders cannot be used as accurately in low and middle-income countries. Because the truth of the matter is, they have seen nothing like the social cultural factors that come into play in those kinds of places. And therefore those systems just cannot be used. And yet, at the end of the day, the how barely gets any screen time, which is extremely problematic. And if we're talking about depression and anxiety in places like low and middle income countries, in my opinion, the how is really, really important. Because believe it or not, the corrective rate that young males and females go through in townships that results in high levels of suicide, in my opinion, that's a how. The societal pressures that women from around the world in low and middle income countries face, being forced to believe that their happiness relies solely on their ability to procreate and marry. That's a how. The same societal norms and pressures that make it acceptable for government officials in places like Kenya and Uganda to preach about self-concealment, to encourage people, and when I say people, I mean their people born, people raised in those countries, to hide who they are out of a fear that their actions might be perceived as bad, negative, or distressing to the culture. I'm talking about places where speakers in parliament have the power to reinstate anti-homosexuality laws, where people aren't allowed to be who they are out of fear of not only imprisonment, but in many cases death. I'm talking about the reality of so many people whose lives we will never interact with. I'm talking about how this fear of being who you are is a how. How, in my opinion, depression manifests. How, in my opinion, depression begins to take control. How, in my opinion, depression ends up taking a life. And of course, how the idea of gratitude and thankfulness once again become the idea of fairy tales. Now please bear in mind that these are not my experiences. These are experiences of people who are not in my position. Though we might look the same and come from the same place, these are the experiences of people who envelop the idea of what the branches of depression are. And when I speak about the branches of depression, these aren't just it. There are others. For example, there are women diagnosed with HIV, dealing with postpartum depression, who cannot afford the luxury, and I will use the term luxury because that is what it is, to access care. I'm talking about the same individuals who are stuck in a world where they are branded as less than if you are a man and you choose to feel because of the ideals of toxic masculinity that we believe don't play into the how of anything. I'm talking about places where the disproportion of wealth is so high that on a stretch of land, you have a piece no bigger than this auditorium used to house over 100 people, and maybe 15 to 20 kilometers down the road, you have the same piece of land, the same size room, used to house no more than 6 individuals in a giant hotel, priced at thousands of dollars a night. If we think about that, one can't help but wonder where we went wrong. And then, if you think about that a little bit more, you can't help but wonder when the why became more important than the how. And when the idea of gratitude and thankfulness became a privilege and not a right. So I guess, in standing here today, what I'm hoping that you'll go out into the world and do is that every day, be it a Monday, a Tuesday, a Thursday, a Friday, you take even 3 minutes of your day to think about the privileges that you have, bearing in mind that they might be more than or less than the people around you. But knowing that you have a duty, not only to yourself, but the people that have worked hard to get you to where you are today, to go out into the world and try and make a difference. And I'm not saying fight for a cause that you don't believe in. I'm saying the complete opposite. Go out there and rally for whatever it is you are passionate about. If you are passionate about making change in the world, go and do it. If you're passionate about water sports, go and do it. Because the truth is, in this world with over 7 billion people, there's at least one person out there that has the exact same drive and passion as you do, that I can promise you is literally just sitting around waiting for someone to come up and be, hey, I'm passionate about what you're passionate about. Let's go out there and rally for it. So why don't you go and do it? Go out there, find someone to campaign alongside, and do something wonderful in this complex world. Thank you.